welcome to New Wave Global. You're watching Unraveled with Marvi Sirmed. Tonight, we unpack a political moment few saw coming, a meeting that has already shifted the mood, tone, and narratives across the American political landscape. Inside the Oval Office, President Donald Trump and New York City's Mayor elect Zohran Mamdani, two men who only months ago exchanged sharp criticism and ideological barbs, sat together in a surprisingly cordial, even warm conversation about housing, affordability, and the future of America's largest city. But what happened inside that room didn't stay there. It has triggered shock waves on the right, puzzled reactions in the center, and deep ambivalence on the left. Tonight, we break down what happened, why it matters, how it was seen, and what it may reveal about a shifting political moment in the United States. Let's begin where the cameras captured more than words, the moments that spoke louder than statements. The visual cues alone were striking. As Mamdani entered, Trump gave him a firm handshake and paused, looking him directly in the eye before nodding slightly, almost as if acknowledging a worthy political opponent. Cameras captured them sitting side by side, not across from each other, sending a subtle signal of partnership rather than confrontation. When a journalist reminded the room that Mamdani had previously called Trump a fascist, Trump cut in with a light-hearted, almost teasing line. You can just say yes, it is easier than explaining.
He asked about your comment calling the president a fascist, and your answer was, both President Trump and I have been clear about our positions and our views. Are you affirming that you think President Trump is a fascist?
I've spoken about...
That's okay, you can just say yes. Okay. It's easier. It's easier than explaining it, I don't mind.
Mamdani smiled, the room exhaled, and the tone shifted visibly. At one moment, Trump said, "We agree on a lot more than I would have thought," and looked directly at Mamdani with what reporters described as genuine surprise. Their exit was equally striking. Trump gestured for Mamdani to walk ahead of him, a reversal of the usual presidential choreography. Even Mamdani's small gestures, such as briefly touching the arm of an aide passing behind him, softened the scene and humanized both men amid the press scrum. These small but potent gestures created a tableau entirely at odds with the hostility that had defined their past exchanges. But beyond the optics, this encounter opened a door that neither man has walked through before. On the surface, the meeting was about affordability, housing pressure, rent, utilities, infrastructure. But the symbolism matters just as much as the substance. You had a Democratic Socialist mayor-elect, one of the most progressive city leaders in America, sitting comfortably with a conservative populist president. You had two political brands, typically in ideological combat, acknowledging common grounds. For Trump, it was an opportunity to soften the culture war posture and speak directly to working class urban concerns. For Mamdani, it was a chance to demonstrate his readiness for governance, not just protest politics by engaging federal power. But if the two men were finding common ground, their supporters certainly were not. And this is where the aftershocks began, in the heart of the MAGA universe. Within minutes of the meeting, conservative spaces exploded. The MAGA base erupted in a mix of disbelief and frustration. Some Trump supporters on different message boards, celebrated the meeting as a power move, arguing that the president looked magnanimous and presidential. But the hard right flank was livid. One of the loudest voices was Laura Loomer, who fumed that Trump's praise of Mamdani was going to normalize communism. Oh God. She blasted that this meeting was a betrayal of Trump's anti socialist message, accusing the president of legitimizing someone who had openly criticized him. On Reddit's conservative forums, the reactions ranged from confusion, like, I wasn't expecting this at all, were you? And others, and it ranged from that to a simmering disappointment. For example, um, another quote from Reddit message boards: uh, "If Mamdani charms Trump, MAGA is in trouble," and that was one of the most read and viewed comment on Reddit. For a movement that thrives on a clear us versus them narrative, Trump smiling warmly at a progressive firebrand created an identity crisis. The movement that thrives on adversarial clarity certainly found itself staring at ambiguity. And ambiguity is the one thing that MAGA does not do well. It doesn't do well at all. As if the right needed more turbulence, another shock followed just hours after this meeting. In a dramatic turn, Marjorie Taylor Greene, MTG, one of the most loyal MAGA warriors, she announced she was resigning from Congress. Now, to understand the significance, we need the backstory because this was not spontaneous. It was basically the culmination of an escalating public feud between President Trump and MTG. Just days earlier, Trump withdrew his endorsement of Marjorie Taylor Greene after accusing her of undermining his uh, legislative priorities and publicly challenging members of his, inner circle. Before that, MTG had criticized the what we often called the big beautiful bill, after discovering it included a provision that would prevent states from regulating artificial intelligence systems for 10 years. And she said she would have voted no if she had known. Now, why she didn't know before voting is topic for another discussion. But yeah, she also opposed Trump's AI executive order, arguing that the plan threatened state rights, environment, jobs, and water resources. He has since thrown his support behind Republican challenger Ben Klein, who is one of the most prominent rival to MTG. And Trump's argument was that Klein would be a more reliable ally for his policy agenda and political strategy. And so tensions exploded. MTG's resignation statement included a telling line: loyalty should be a two-way street. And that's quote unquote, that her words. Now, this is not a trivial footnote. Her departure marked a visible fracture within the Republican movement, a symbolic unraveling at the very moment Trump was extending warmth towards a progressive Democrat. If the Mamdani meeting was the spark, MTG's resignation was the explosion, illuminating the deeper cracks. While the right wrestled with its contradictions, the left and center watched with a mixture of awe, caution, and disbelief. Centrists and moderates celebrated the civility, While some pundits wondered if this signaled a new era or at least a momentary departure from toxic polarization. Progressives, however, they were torn. Many appreciated Mamdani's composure and his ability to articulate a people centric agenda in the highest office in the country. They recognized the necessity of federal engagement for transformative housing and transit reforms that have been the center point of Mamdani's campaign throughout. But they also raised critical questions. Would working with Trump dilute Mamdani's bold progressive vision? Would symbolic cooperation overshadow the need for deep structural change? Would movement activists lose leverage if radical clarity gave way to bipartisan politeness? For the left, the meeting offered opportunity but also risk. Opportunity for resources and risk of co option. That has always been a risk. And while Washington calculated reactions, the wider cultural world weighed in too. Commentators noted that Trump's treatment of Mamdani was warmer than his treatment of President Zelensky in past meetings, prompting comparisons and commentary from celebrities, satirists, and political influencers. There were memes circulating of Trump looking at Mamdani with heart eyes. Late night hosts joked about Trump finding his new favorite socialist. Conservative commentators warned of confused messaging to the Republican base. I told you, ambiguity is not something that MAGA does well. Even apolitical public figures reacted with bemused surprise at the level of comfort between two political opposites. Actors, comedians, podcast hosts, mostly expressing surprise that the meeting looked more like a diplomatic tete-a-tete than a clash of ideologies. But beyond these reactions, these gestures and headlines, a deeper political question emerges. Does this meeting mark a real pivot uh, in overall American politics, from polarization to pragmatic engagement, or was it a one-off charm offensive that changes nothing? The meeting between President Trump and Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani was not just a I think it was not just a political handshake. It was a collision of narratives, identities, expectations, and of power. A moment of ideological elasticity that startled the right, intrigued the center, and unsettled the left. Whether it produces authentic change or evaporates as political theater remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: American politics is shifting, and this meeting is part of that story. For New Wave Global, you have been watching Unraveled with Marvi Sirmed. Thank you for joining me, and we'll continue to follow this story as it unfolds. Have a good one. Bye bye.